Welcome to the UNICOM channel English department. To the lecture today, be with us. Initially, we welcome everyone and salute all the attendants and honor us the bright, great view of bright faces, the seeker of knowledge and truth in order of awareness and the human advance. Be with us and to the lecture today. So, to there.
Convoy to the evolution 20 foci of origin and strains of animal beings. How was them? How did they develop? And how did they form? The origins of animal beings and their breeds. Before we go into the course of our lecture today, so let's take a little lean through and take a look at the meditation towards situations of our world today. We should say whoever thinks that the accidents of transient nature have a source to guide them, as lessons and examples have been woven in legends of history, our world now lives. One of them is the transient coronavirus incident, and that the coronavirus is an existed reality. And it is not imagination or visualization, and the human mind must exert greatest of his intellectual and scientific efforts to save and protect the human species from the attacks of other beings of existence and the products of their natural, chronic activities, and everyone who sees that there is any salvation comes from outside the human system, or from above the human mind. He resorted to repeating legends of history, preparing the ship of salvation, and gather all believers by that inside it. Contrary the directives issued by the humanitarian institutions for health and crisis management, that the corona incident is only one of incidents of flood that are repeated throughout history and will be repeated, but it is realistic and not metaphysical. So, to the course of lecture first. Before we take any step in this blatant framework, the follower or reader must make sure that he has understood that the universe has diversified in itself. Between beings have inanimate characteristics and behavior and shapes, so that there are no feelings and no senses for them, but there is results of actions and not reactions. When the metallic elements and materials are melted, or burnt, or changed their states in front of thermal and cold circumstances, that happens under the complete unconscious. And from here we take consciousness as value of criterion of being, between its maximum progressive stages in the development, and its lowest material states in asceticism towards the unconscious. And thus, the beings ranks from whereas ranks of evolution from inanimate subconscious to the highest levels of ability. On the visualization and knowledge is an advanced stage of development and consciousness, which human beings now lead, in forefront of living beings, through the ability to visualize, analyze and knowledge through mental capabilities. So the differences come, even between individuals of human beings themselves, in an individual framework and very personal and absolutely. This brings us back to the breeds versions which made up the person and quality of copying tasks at the copying entity tools and circumstances of formation and the structure within focus of uterus. Then the environmental conditions and life requirements accompanying education of personality of being entity, with a clear contrast from the inanimate beings. That the beings of biotic behaviors and traits all have some kind of sensations and feelings, and they are all transformed compounds from the origins of the inanimate elements. Then these transibles were varied according to the sizes and coarse contents of their basis components and their formational circumstances, so they divided into degrees according to levels of evolution, and thus became vegetarian behavior and attributes and have a degree of sense and vital behaviors, and others have animal behavior and attributes and have sensations, feelings and rationality, and possesses a mental apparatus specialized in the central affairs of being and its management and control of its life functions. Then these animal beings diversified into strains. They are distinguished from some others by physical characteristics, phenotypically, basic formational, and psychological behaviors, so that they cannot reproduce or give birth to one another among themselves, so that two strains cannot be combined with each other for sake of biological existence. Otherwise the result will be they do not reproduce between them, and all they will faded and they will become extinct from existence as beings. And so that any living being, if capable to produces a third similar being through the natural reproduction with any living being, that means conformity in the origins and foundations, which they are in fact the same being and not something else at all. Even if they came from foci of origin and strains, they differ completely in their physical manifestations. Over course of history of evolution and the typical mutations that the physical and behavioral and stereotypical change in the live beings, it is a natural habit made by circumstances that these beings, which divided them the origins and the evolution and the circumstances, even as living beings and then as animal beings, were again divided as animal beings in terms of capabilities of the mind, so they became. So through our narration, we reach to what extent the environment and circumstances play in creating physical and behavioral variations between foci of origin of strains of one species of animal beings. And it is necessary to know how foci of origin were and where they were. According to the UNICOM's visualizations and analyses and conclusions, that foci of origin of all animal beings, including foci of origin of human beings, as we said, that they were all spread throughout the Earth planet in the post-transformation stage, are spherical bodies of materials which made up from them the bones, such as calcium and others formed the pot contain inside it the cells of brain components and tools. The first thing it was developed was an external thick cortex, as a means of protection, and a base, installed on it follicles of dense hair. Its mission is to completely cover surfaces of spherical entities from the outside, considers as the nest and cradle that lie in it, and it forms the outer cortex. And the hair follicles compatible in the shape and the color with the surrounding environment, where location of focus of origin, where the outer shell that is now the skin and hair follicles were both performing function of external protection through camouflage and appropriate with the environment, and prevent direct contact with any external beings with the center, as they block the crossing of water and liquids and direct sunlight, and maintains appropriate temperatures, as the hair performs brim over and swimming tasks where the liquids are. And they also perform the internal and external absorption of materials that the focus center needs inside, or excreted during the interactions and manufacturing processes, and so on. The skin expands and the hair according to the expansion of body to carry out the same historical functions to this day. And if it is subjected to any external amputation, it grows as quickly as possible to repel the gap, and anyone can notice now that the hair thickens where the glands are for protection and excretion. And as it grows intensively on the bodies of the live beings according to the climate conditions in which they live and are compatible with color and appearance with the environment. And while surface of planet at the time was overtaken by ice, which wherever it melted run towards the curves, the slopes and the grooves, and abandon the elevated places. So according to these circumstances there are 4 different environmental places around the Earth planet and in its interior, spread over them, with a high density, to the rare compounds, which they became transformed beings. Then they evolved to become foci of origin for the strains of living beings, so they became plants beings and animal beings, among them which were foci of origin of strains of human beings, and that all of these foci of origin continued to develop in circumstances of one of these 4 major environments, either in the underground environment below the surface and internal cavities, or on surface of Earth's crust covers under the ice, either on the surface of Earth's crust where the curves and the grooves streak under the melted water from the ice, either on surface of Earth's crust, where the elevated places from which the water withdrew and became open in direct confrontation with the sun rays. According to states of these 4 environments, the requirements for seeking, moving, searching for ways of life and its requirements, and for catching up with them, for survival and life, the life beings develop tools and means of movement, then the foci of origin of beings which were submerged in water and became in the deep inside, so that there is no way for its continuity other than staying there. They developed the fins for swimming and became water beings. To this day, and the beings which were from the swimmers' beings until advanced stages of development and the water retreated and left them in dry, closed, deserted spots and without requirements of life, they developed the wings and became flies crossing over ice and water in pursuit about demands of life. And the beings which were in the open areas and not immersed in water, they developed legs to become able to walk long distances to reach the water and requirements of life, and from the noticeable that similarities exist in the structures and physical components between the flying beings and the aquatic beings. The environment unit emphasizes between them for long periods of stages of development before the flying species reach mutations of developing the wings. Ether amphibians developed in spots which withdrew water from them, but they remained rich with requirements of life in swamps of water. They did not need to fly and were not forced to live under the surface of walks between crawling, walking and swimming. Yes, the multiplicity of environments gave living beings with multiple physical forms, multiple manifestations, multiple behaviors, and life methods, so the volatiles from them, and walkers from them, and crawlers from them, and the swimmers from them, and on the same reasons, the multiplicity of colors, scales, and weights, even in beings of one species, in that the present manifestations of beings were not their states from the beginning, but rather the product of continuous developments and multiple mutations over millions of years. Whoever can move today, has been steady one day, and who can walk on two today or fly. Perhaps he was crawling or swimming at some point in the development, or it was walking on the four at another stage, and the first early foci of origins. The first foci of origin have fought a desperate struggle, with great severity, and billions of foci of origin failed in the early stages and faded, especially foci of origin of animal beings. In the stages of self-copying where the single foci, or in the later stages where the sexually separated strains. Whereas the stage which allowed by the reproductive mating between beings of one species, and the mixing between the strains within diverse characteristics which they came by from foci of origin, then gave good and positive results, enabled types of animal beings to improve, fortify, and develop in the changing mutations and continuity in life and existence. And had it not been for the mixing between many strains with their varied and numerous natural characteristics brought it from different foci of origin, they carry a variety of pros and cons. Then the increase rise up in the size of pros and diminished in size of cons by merging the strains through the random reproduction, then produced beings with new characteristics. As there would be no animal beings today, because beings of species whose strains failed to fuse to create the equation of change for the sake of keeping pace, all became extinct. And you can ask the dinosaurs and states of many species of life beings which we see them struggling to survive in our world today. Those who did not develop or change will sooner or later become extinct. So how did foci of origin face the extinction factors and became able to continue? In terms of how foci of origin have encountered extinction factors and have succeeded in continuing existence was the first lesson that beings of existence have to be learned from the first mothers. In how to face and keep up with the fluctuations and activities of nature, in order to preserve life in its finest forms and to continue to exist, and we said, the first mothers. Because the beginning of life for all living beings were female, meaning that the foci of origin were female beings, only that they had bilateral gonads. And they perform internal fertilization process, similar to what happens in the genetics now, and then it copies its cells, the physical and hereditary. And then she do task of process of incubation and development of interior, and then process of external upbringing, until it becomes a similar being. These natural tasks, that all the tools which use for their implementation, are available within composition of female body until now, except for the fertilization cells that were later separated. the mother beings in one from stages of development, and have copied to them a matching being to carry them, that who became the male being. Because that the male body is nothing but the exact female body, but in the chromosomes contain two female in the components of male cells versus one for the male. Meaning that she created him as a female, omitted from him a third of components, and developed another third as substitute, replacing the deleted third, to perform by that the normal tasks, which put the responsibility on him as a male. She developed him in order to that, and that the differences are more often due to mere hormones, some of which have been provided to him in full, and some that have stripped him of them and kept them for herself. For example, the breasts are present in the female body and the male body, but they are disabled in the male and do not work, while in the female they have their hormones and their full functions to be used in bringing up, though she copied them. Beings of origin continued, or the first mothers, for the greatest number of animal beings, millions of years. And they maintain the existence and continuity through production of transcribed organisms for the same mothers, which assumed their role in process of transcription and procreation in another generation, while at the same time were continuing and producing side-by-side beings of services and protection, which create them with their inactivated proliferative cells. However, they have complete hardware and open outlet holes, whose functions relate to the vital activities for the body, which we can call them the second-generation beings, one of the evolutionary mutation, thus, until the evolution reached by them in one of generations, to produce completely separate and different beings in their glands, cells, and reproductive hormones, and each of them is built with specialized devices which differ each from another, while they integrate according to functions of reproduction and fertilization, and they are linked to the body's excretory systems, which consider an evolutionary mutation to what they were producing in the second-generation beings, or embodied itself in what it was producing in the second-generation beings and new two beings, independent each of them from another, while functionally they complement to carry out all the roles, tasks and requirements of life for existence, and reproductive for continuity and protection in order of safety, or the first mothers of animal beings before they fade into submission to circumstances, in order to keep pace with nature. They solute equation of permanent existence in the evolution, in one being divided itself functionally into two natural entities. They are in everything, they are attractively, they are paralleled, they are balanced, they are equally, they are symmetrically, and they are complementary, so that they do not coincide, and neither one of them embodies the other naturally, and neither of them be completed without the other, to achieve natural role of life being, for survival in the existence and the continuity absolutely. Those what we call them, the third-generation beings, one of the evolutionary mutation, which are form of classy animal beings that live on the Earth planet now. That beings of third generation of evolutionary mutation of animal beings are considered the pinnacle and conclusion of evolution, in terms of physical components and functional tools. And it is the stage of stability and firmness, so that there is no addition after them on body of animal beings, but there are physical changes according to environmental circumstances and life factors, and biological mixing between species of disparate strains of one species that came from foci of multiple and different origin, the third-generation animal beings, which are gland of fully feminine female beings, and fully masculine male beings, which were evolved and produced by the first mothers, first-generation beings before their extinction, and then caught up with them the second-generation beings that do not reproduce at all, while the third-generation beings which reproduce and produce. But they do not produce the second-generation beings, except in case of a mistake in the genetic functions, and they do not evolve in the organism's body system, but they only repeat, on way of copying only, and producing new beings similar to them, either male or female, those males and females produced by beings of third generation, because they were fully evolved, capable of movement, managed to get out of framework of environment of origin. They were cause of mixing between the different strains, and the reproduction between them. and the production of new beings with many physical changes able to face all circumstances and live in all environments along the Earth planet. As for strains that did not find an opportunity to mingle with other strains of their animal species and failed to create physical change in order to keep pace, their strains became extinct throughout the ages, whether by natural retreating of their basic components from through repeated fixed genetic copying, or failure to create natural physical capabilities capable of facing fluctuations of nature and requirements of life, this which still fate of many animals and human strains, which are threatened with extinction or will soon be threatened by extinction, due to the failure in the process of biological mixing with other strains to create a process of renewal and physical ability for keep up, although there is no strain of animal or human not mixed, but all of them product of random mixing in the ancient eras. That process of biological mixing between beings of strains of animal species, it started early from moments of first periods of produce, the third generation beings, which cannot survive or continue only in at least bilateral family couple, because there is a natural motivated force, and attractiveness lies in the symmetrical biology components per couple based on their physical formation, which does not differ from one of two either as a female or as a male. Wherever and however they found from the same type, there's a latent natural relationship which is active at any moment, creates communication at the subconscious level before it escalates and reaches level of physical relationship. However, the physical relationship requires the consciousness and knowledge. And here comes the question about childhood innocence and about knowledge of inhuman animal beings, about their feelings and stages of practicing their physical relationships, so that we know that the issue is task for cells and genes inherent in bodies of beings which have their stages and ages and stages of activity for growth and production, in order to perform its natural roles in maintaining continuity in existence, while the first products from the third generation beings roaming surface of Earth planet in individual over the early stages of growth and moving along the overlapping environments were meeting their kinds from other breed products. And there were no family sitter and family shelters from the beginning, not even languages of communication, but there was a relationship of natural instincts. And every being roam on his face on surface of Earth planet whenever he got up from the cradle of childhood, and since the property its basis was the family formation, the first owners were the females from third generation beings, who have been wandering along the open environments in multiple and open sexual relationships where there are no existing intermarriage relationships. But the mother who carries is the one who gives birth and cares for her children under the growth and rising until advanced stages of life according to relationship of emerging motherhood. The child follows his mother, and for years she will followed by a swarm of children, under growing up without knowing where or who are their real parents are. The mother's authority over the family was the first for millions of years, before animals and human beings reached a stage that consisted of family herds and protected environments in which female owners and strong males to protect herds, which consisting from children of females themselves. Based on what we have listed in the previous paragraphs, then issue of strains in organisms that now roam the world, whether they are animal or human, is not a question of roots and no origins, because the true roots and origins of all strains are extinct in ancient times and there are no traces of them at all. The current strains are result of family formation in very advanced stages when the beings reached stages of conglomeration and understanding that led to creation of languages and cultures, and separated between these clusters geographic and natural factors that made them in separate broad areas and far away from each other, and not able to convergent for millions of years. But for millions of previous years these beings were spread on surface of Earth planet in a random manner. They were pollinating and breeding and spreading. Then they stray from cradle of motherhood and identifying similar beings and adopting a new relationship that produces new beings, which are a mixture of strains. But the factors which distinguish the strains now, they are physical phenomena acquired or manufactured, because true knowledge of beings comes only through their types. only as human beings or as cows or as monkeys or dogs, but as strains until genetics DNA. You only reach percentages of mixtures. They return to a variety of geographic environments, and not the real origins from which they came as beings, like a biological race, a son from a father, from a grandfather, from the same category only, even strain of mother and father. To what without and through the ages, then you are a biological mixture being, perhaps the person whom you hate, his genes running in the foundations of your depths. While you don't know and you can't see that, then that who is him, that is you surely. In conclusions of this lengthy narration, to assume a visualization in order to materialize the missing rings from history of planet Earth, we were able to remove immortal inquiries about content of word of coincidence in the existence of this universe and its amazingly phased components, and our relationships with it, or even our relationships between us as human beings, those the gray spaces that have remained mysterious, pale, or metaphysical, or contradictory and unbelievable in all civilizations throughout the ages. So the question remains, is it a human being alone who is wondering about causes of existence of this universe, or are there others? And whether existence of universe beings and components is necessary for sake of continuity of life for every living being, then does the life itself a necessity? And if the life is important, is it important to us as living beings, or for the comprehensive universe? And in all cases, why we live, and why we hate the death and fading, if death is an end of a tragedy, and the end of bitter, painful and costly struggles in order to face the requirements of life, while the life means the continuation on active lines of confrontation in order to survive in the existence. Then the death is not a bad thing or frightening thing, and that life is not a wonderful or preferred thing, but the bad is when it fragments and fades an entity it had a coherent presence and persistent activity, and broad hopes and desires and dreams that have not yet been fulfilled. Because fragmentation and fade will end relationship built on reasons to dreams of sake of who's built it in order to survival and continuity, and that it is sad. Because every member of a similar entity is part of happiness of others are still alive, and because it is the end of a long road that extends from the ancient ages. But death is not a bad or sad thing for the one who immortalized survival and continuity in others, and embodied an acting entity that achieves factor of happiness in the lives of others. In that life will be wonderful and preferable when it fulfills the happiness, desires and hopes of everyone, and not feel sorry those who they fated and immortalized it in their behind. Then, it doesn't has meaning that a person lives and is not satisfied with life, and is not satisfied with life, and no meaning for a person to die, while he or others are not satisfied with what makes his memory immortal. So, you live happy and make the others happier, and die happy and immortalize for your memory who or what make others happier, and so you will immortalize continuity and survival in existence, and it will be has meaning. And until we meet in other aspects of our processions, we extend to you all kindness, greetings, and appreciation from Visualization of Kanda Steps 2019.